There's a strange moment that happens in many people's careers. You start feeling that you are ready for the next step. You know the job well, you know the problems that once felt difficult now feel routine. The systems make sense, the politics of the organization are clearer, and you start noticing that the decisions being made above you are not mysterious anymore. In short, you begin to understand them. At that point, many professionals assume the next step will simply arrive. They believe someone senior will notice their performance and then connect the dots and conclude that this person is ready for more responsibility. And sometimes that does happen. But far more often, in my experience, nothing happens at all. My name is Marcel. I'm a chartered manager with more than 2 decades of promoting people and getting promoted myself. I've led departments and was responsible for the careers of those reporting to me. In this episode of Management Deconstructed, we're going to focus on how to make sure everyone knows that you're ready for that new position and not just you in your head. From my experience, I know that promotions don't come as rewards of good behavior. And the reason is quite simple. Promotions inside organizations rarely happen because someone is good at their current role. They happen when senior management becomes comfortable with the idea that someone is already operating at that next level. That distinction changes the entire strategy. You may argue that it doesn't make sense to do the job before it's even offered to you. The difference is more subtle than that. Instead of asking how to convince management you deserve a promotion, the more useful question becomes this: how do you gradually shape their perception so that promoting you just feels obvious? This is not something that happens in a single meeting. It rarely works as a direct request, and it almost never works as a sudden push during a performance review. If you have a vision of sitting down with your manager, you saying that you deserve a promotion and them approving it, then I have some very disappointing news for you. That doesn't happen. And if you imagine yourself throwing an ultimatum of either you promote me or I'm going, then I can tell you what I've done every single time when I was given that choice. I would let people go. They showed they weren't ready. The most reliable approach is slower. If you want to move up, you need to think in terms of timeline of at least 6 months, and ideally closer to a year. During that period, your goal isn't simply to perform well. Your goal is to gradually demonstrate the behaviors, thinking patterns, and signals that senior leaders would associate with the next level. When you approach it this way, the promotion conversation stops feeling like a persuasion and starts feeling like just confirmation. So let's talk about how to approach this in practice. A useful way to think about the process is to break it into 3 stages. The first stage is about changing how people categorize you inside the organization. The second stage focuses on demonstrating leadership signal. And the third stage is about making the promotion feel like natural next step. Now, each stage builds on the previous one, and each usually takes a few months minimum. Stage 1, expanding your thinking beyond your role. Let's talk about stage 1, expanding your thinking beyond your role. I know that this will be uncomfortable, but the growth needs to start with you. And it's not about getting new skills, it's about managing optics. In the early part of the process, the goal is to start shifting how leadership perceives you and not about how you work. Now, at this stage, most professionals are still seen primarily through the lens of the current responsibilities. They are known as capable analysts, strong operators, reliable project contributors, and perhaps a dependable specialist. In my instance, 20 years ago, I was a dependable operator with above average delivery standards. I was in the top 10%, turning up every day and consistently proving my worth. All of those things are positive, but they also kept me firmly anchored to my level at the time. I was a square peg in a square hole. If senior management sees you only as someone who performs tasks extremely well, they will naturally keep you in a position where those tasks are valuable. It only makes sense to do so, so you need to change that aspect. The first shift, therefore, is not about working harder. It's about starting to think and behave slightly above your role. And one of the easiest ways to do is by widening your awareness of how your organization actually functions. I don't want this to become a hollow phrase, so let me go deeper into it, because without this, the rest of the journey won't happen. Many professionals spend most of their attention inside their own task. The world is defined by deadlines, deliverables, and immediate responsibilities, but managers and senior operators tend to operate differently. Your attention is directed towards systems, patterns, and dependencies between teams. We don't focus on how individual cog of the machine works because that's the cog's responsibility, but instead focus on how all cogs operate together. Now, once you start observing the organization from that perspective, you begin to notice things that previously went unnoticed. And actually, your current position is perfectly placed to suggest changes. You might see the same operational problems appearing again and again. You might notice friction between teams that slow down the project. You might recognize processes that seem unnecessary or complicated but aren't seen by the senior management because their focus is on the bigger picture. Those observations are the first step toward thinking like a manager. What often changes next is the way you speak about your work, and I strongly suggest that you start doing that deliberately. So instead of simply reporting what you completed, your conversations need to include things like patterns, issues, and potential improvements. You might mention that a particular bottleneck appears repeatedly, or that two teams seem to misunderstand each other's priorities. Now let me give you a practical example. Let's say you're a warehouse supervisor and you notice that between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. there are many lorries to load, but the staff is always on break. Before the new thinking, you may say things like, well, it's a pain. But with the new thinking, you should be considering whether you need A, adjust the break time to accommodate the peak in lorries, or B, talk to haulier companies about whether they could stagger arrivals. This kind of thinking signals something important to people above you. It shows that you're not just executing work, you are beginning to understand the system in which the work happens. Now, none of these ideas may be possible to realize or implement, but the very fact that you saw the larger picture, the machine, it sends a strong signal that you are outside of your own square hole. And from there, the next step is surprisingly simple. Whenever possible, try solving small versions of problems. And I mean, try finding a long-term solution, not just on the spot. It's not about helping in that one situation, but about finding a better pattern for tomorrow and the day after. This doesn't mean launching massive initiatives or redesigning entire processes. I'm talking about small improvements that often create stronger signals because they show your practical judgment. Perhaps you simplify a recurring report that no one enjoys producing. Perhaps you can clarify a process that repeatedly causes confusion. Perhaps you can organize information in a way that helps the team move faster. These are not dramatic achievements, but they reveal a certain type of mindset. They show that you're quietly making the system work better. Over a few months, small actions like this begin to change how people talk about you. Instead of being described purely as someone who delivers tasks well, you start being seen as someone who improves the way that work happens. And that subtle shift is the first step towards being considered for promotion. Stage 2, demonstrating leadership signal. Okay, let's move on to stage 2. This may be 3, 6, or 12 months after you started the first stage. And that's fine. We are building strong foundation here. Once you have established that broader mindset, the next stage focuses on something even more important. You need to show that you can influence outcomes through people, not just through your own work. Now, the reason this matters becomes obvious the moment anyone moves into management. At that point, personal productivity stops being the main measure of value. What begins to matter far more is what the team achieves collectively. Often you will hear the phrase mindset shift used to describe this, so let me dig a bit deeper into this. It means that you need to move from thinking about how you would do things to focusing on how you would motivate others to do those things. It's a lot more difficult because you are one step removed from those deliverables. Senior leaders understand this very well. When they think about promotions, they are quietly asking themselves whether someone can guide others, whether they can coordinate efforts or help teams perform better. The interesting thing is that those behaviors don't require a formal management title. They can appear just naturally in everyday work. And one of the simplest ways that begins this is through helping colleagues succeed. When someone consistently offers useful advice, shares knowledge, and helps others navigate difficult tasks, they gradually become a reference point inside the team. And people start coming to them with questions. Colleagues ask for their opinion before making decisions. Newer employees seek the guidance when they feel uncertain. Now, these small interactions might not feel particularly significant, but they create a powerful signal inside the organization. They suggest that leadership is already emerging informally. Another opportunity often appears in what could be described as messy organizational problems. And what I mean by that is that every company has issues that sit slightly outside formal responsibilities. These might involve unclear processes, recurring misunderstandings between teams, or problems that everyone complains about but nobody truly owns. Most professionals avoid these areas because they fall outside defined roles. However, those spaces are exactly where leadership signals often appears. Taking an interest in these issues doesn't mean taking on responsibility for everything. In many cases, the most valuable contribution is simply bringing clarity. You might map out the problem, suggest possible improvements, or just help different teams align on a solution. When someone consistently helps move ambiguous situations towards resolutions, people begin associating them with leadership capability. And communication style also begins to evolve during this phase. Junior professionals often communicate by describing everything that happened. Senior professionals, on the other hand, tend to summarize situations more strategically. If you want to know more about this, I highly recommend watching my other videos. Instead of listing activities, senior professionals describe the issue, outline possible options, and suggest a recommendation. The style of communication signals that someone is thinking at the level where decisions are made. And when leadership sees those patterns repeatedly, that's exactly the moment that their perception begins to shift again. Stage 3, making the promotion obvious. All right. When that happens, we officially start stage 3 of the process, making the promotion obvious. By the time the process reaches this stage, several months have usually passed. And you'll be glad to hear that this stage is probably the shortest of them all. Something subtle should already be happening inside the organization at that stage. The way people describe you may have started to change. Instead of saying that you're simply good at your role, colleagues and managers might describe you as a capable, reliable, or someone who naturally takes initiative. And those words might seem small, but they often reflect a deeper change in perception. People begin imagining you in a broader capacity. The final stage focuses on reinforcing that perception until promotion feels like the logical next step, not for you, but for your superiors. And one way this happens is through gradually operating slightly above your current level. It doesn't mean stepping beyond your authority or creating tension with existing managers. It simply means becoming comfortable taking responsibility for slightly larger pieces of work to what you normally do. You might coordinate a project or facilitate a discussion between teams or suggest improvements in how certain tasks are organized. What I have to stress is that you, more often than not, need to request access to those. Saying things like, I want to evidence my capabilities, or this is something I'm comfortable with doing, it's necessary. Please don't wait until someone hands you the opportunity and reach it for yourself instead. Then, these activities mirror the kind of work someone in your next role would naturally perform. As leadership becomes accustomed to seeing you in that capacity, the psychological distance between your current role and the next one begins to shrink. Visibility also becomes important at this stage, although this is often misunderstood. So let's bite a little bit into that aspect. Visibility doesn't mean an obvious self-promotion. Saying things like, I'm the diamond, is great for the apprentice, but it just makes you look silly and not ready for any meaningful future. The right visibility simply means ensuring that the outcomes of your work are visible to the people responsible for those promotion decisions. Now, this may take the form of a short email. Project X is now completed 2 weeks ahead of schedule. Is there anything else I can focus on? Or It can be as simple as a comment when passing the more senior colleague in the corridor. By the way, we've now completed that project we discussed last week. Senior leaders rarely see the day-to-day details of operational work. If improvements happen quietly without being communicated, those improvements often remain invisible to them. So a brief update that highlights what changed and why it matters can make a significant difference. When leadership can connect your actions with tangible improvements, they begin to associate your presence with positive outcomes. And after enough time has passed, the promotion conversation itself, well, it becomes relatively straightforward. Instead of asking directly for the role, it often works better to approach the discussion from a developmental perspective. You might express interest in progressing within the organization and ask what expectations exist at the next level. This kind of conversation signals ambition without creating pressure. Now, in many cases, leadership may already have been thinking along similar lines. When that alignment exists, the discussion feels far less like a negotiation and far more like planning. At this stage, let's talk about the underlying psychology of promotion. When people talk about promotions, they often imagine a decisive moment, something glorious like a big achievement, a major conversation, a sudden opportunity. Now, in reality, promotions tend to emerge from something much quieter and definitely long planned. I've never seen anyone rise to the next level on the back of one deal they made. Perhaps these moments exist, but in my 20 years of different roles and organizations, these events were rather a confirmation of someone's competence more than a springboard for a higher position for them. Senior leaders are constantly making risk assessment about the people around them. They are evaluating who seems capable of handling larger responsibilities and who might struggle if the scope of the role suddenly expands. Every action that demonstrates broader thinking, informal leadership, and visible impact, now that gradually reduces that perceived risk. And over time, these signals accumulate, and eventually the idea of promoting someone stops feeling like a gamble. It begins to feel more like an obvious step. And when a promotion feels obvious to the people making the decision, the conversation that follows becomes much easier. And it's not because someone demanded the opportunity, but because the organization already sees them operating at that level. I hope this episode helped. Growing into senior management is constantly shifting ability to deliver results from us as individual contributors to others as a collective that we help to coordinate and deliver clear vision. And if you liked it, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.